Good morning. This morning I am coming to you live from the Gold Star Families Memorial Monument in color. The reason I'm here this morning is because I'm going to be talking about the Blackhawk crash that killed 3 of my friends November 29, 2004 at Fort Hood, Texas. I wanted to do this right here as an honor to the Gold Star families that survived. For Mark's wife and his 2 kids, his parents, David's daughter and his father and mother, and Richard's daughter and father and mother. I want to recognize them as a Gold Star families for the sacrifice they gave up 17 years ago yesterday. So let me flip the camera around here. So, like I said, it's been 17 years since Blackhawk crash at Fort Hood. It was a Thursday morning, about 7 o'clock, and I had just returned from a funeral the night before. I was on funeral detail. I was the NCIC of the funeral detail for my battalion. We were covering funerals about two-thirds of the state of Texas. So we were going to funerals almost every other day or every 2 or 3 days, depending on how far we had to go for the funerals. And we did anywhere from 55 to 60 funerals in 6 months. So a very busy time for us, and a very stressful time too, because you're trying to keep up with a lot of moving parts. I was assigned to HE headquarters company's 2-4 Aviation Battalion in May of 2000, and then of course in September 2001, 9/11 hit. We were in the field. I was just finishing up breakfast for the battalion. The helicopters were out there. We were not getting any information. Back then cell phones didn't have the capabilities they did, but we knew something was wrong. We got the word on the radio that all Blackhawks, all helicopters, all aircraft were grounded. So we were just stuck out there. We cleaned up and brought trucks back in, and eventually the helicopters come in. Mark and David and Richard were all out there. 2002, we started deploying to National Training Center in Fort Irwin, California, and we went out there 4 times. And so I was out there with my friends during those train-ups to get ready for Operation Iraqi Freedom. In March 2003, we deployed to Iraq and spent a year over there. And I flew with David and Mark and Richard on several occasions. I was a quick reactionary force person for my battalion at first, and then later on became the NCIC of the Internet Cafe, where Mark and David and Richard frequent visit, calling home and talking to their families and stuff, and I got to know them really well through those interactions. Like I said, it was a Thursday morning. The sun was out. The fog had cleared. But the Blackhawk crash happened about 30 miles north of Fort Hood. Like I said, I just picked up a funeral from the night before, and I was going back up to 3 Corps to turn in the details and settle up with travel vouchers and stuff. So I walked into 3 Corps headquarters after formation with my first sergeant. And as soon as I walked in the door, the clerk said, "Hey, Sergeant Hood," not a word. Of course, I understood completely. Nobody knew at that point, except for a couple of us who had been killed. And so, obviously, nobody wanted early information released. I sat there for a second, gathering myself, as I saw the names of 3 of my friends being written on the board. Chief Warrant Officer David Mark Evans Jr., Chief Warrant Officer 2 David Gardner Jr., and Specialist Richard Brown. So I signed for a funeral in Dallas. We left to go do that. I got a little bit sidetracked and had got my beret. So I told my guys when we got to Dallas, we'd do the funeral without berets. Unfortunately, I had a second lieutenant in the funeral, and he asked me about it, and I told him I got sidetracked, sir, because of the Blackhawk. And so he understood, and forgave me, and we went back to Fort Hood. I turned in the funeral, picked up the next funeral, and that's the thing about it is, we are in the Army and we don't have time to sit there and not do anything. We have to keep moving. Missions continue. So the next day I'm on my way to Carthage, Texas to conduct a funeral, getting updates as we're going along on the cell phone from my commander. We do the funeral in Carthage. I'm on my way back the day after that back to Fort Hood. It is now November 30th, December 1st, and my commander calls me up, say, "Hey, Sergeant Hood, I know you got your Class A's ready. I need you to escort David's father." So as soon as I got back from the funeral in Carthage, I went and turned my funeral in and went over to pick up David's father from the hotel to escort him to the funeral home where David was at, and we started making arrangements for the funeral. And so in between taking care of David's father, I continued to do the funerals. And so as the events unfolded, we found out that the fog had moved in that early morning, about 6:30, right as sunlight's coming up, and they couldn't see, and they hit the storm had knocked out the power to the lights like the week before, so they wasn't working, and so they ended up hitting the TV tower there, just outside between Temple and Fort Hood. And so that was the reason for the crash, and like 1,500 feet up or something like that. I don't know. But anyway, so it was a very bad wreck. And the thing about it is, like I said, we just keep going. We keep flying missions, we keep doing our missions on the ground and everything else. So, next day I'm going to a funeral. It's a day before we're having a memorial at Church of Christ prayer house in Killeen, and so the next day I pick up David's father for the memorial, and I pick up his fiancee Jacqueline, and so we're going to the church, and Jacqueline's asking me about sitting with the family. I said, yeah, it shouldn't be a problem, and I did not realize how many hundreds of people were going to be there, and they crowded in. And so I was sitting next to David's father, so I got up from my seat and gave it to Jacqueline so she could sit with the family, because in the Army, a fiance unfortunately does not count as family, and so it was one of those things that just has to happen somehow, and I made it happen, and I gave my seat up instead for the memorial service. After the memorial service, I took David's father back to the hotel. We went over to David's house, and spent the afternoon there. Next day I'm taking off for another funeral, and then come back, and then I find out that we're going to do a joint service for Mark. Mark was prior Navy, so we had Navy people come in, and we trained for 2 days with the Navy so that we would be precise on our movements and stuff, and folding the flag for Mark's funeral. And so I had a hand in that, in training the Navy people to be able to do it up to what we were used to, so that all the movements were precise and nobody made a mistake, because it's very important in a funeral detail that you don't make a mistake, because that mistake could be the last thing that the family members remember about the military, is that you screwed up their loved one's funeral. You don't want that. So, day of the service, December 9th, we had both funerals. Mark's in the morning, so he was going to be cremated, so we went to the chapel, and General Thurman, the division commander for 4th ID, came out to me. He said, "Hey, Sergeant Hood, this is the situation we got." He told me that the wife, Mark's wife, did not want anything, parents get anything, flag, awards, anything for the funeral. So he said the game plan is that, we'll have people in the chapel. The chaplain will ask everybody to remain seated as the wife leaves with her children. And once she is completely out of the chapel, somebody will come back in and nod to you, and we'll have a second flag behind the podium, and we'll put it over the coffin and fold it. I thought really kind of how unusual it was for a family not to be able to put aside differences for a funeral, but that is what it is. So we folded a second flag over Mark's coffin, and we finished that one up, and then later on in the afternoon went out to Clean Cemetery, where we did the service for David, and we folded 2 flags for them. Folded one for David's daughter, and we folded one for David's father. The mother would be with the daughter, so that's how those work. And then next day I'm back at 3 Corps picking up funerals. And somebody asked me, how did I grieve? Because they were wondering themselves. And I said, well, I grieve in hotel rooms when I'm on the road with funerals. I grieve when I'm walking. I grieve when I'm driving back and forth to funerals. I grieve when I fold a flag every time over someone else's coffin. I grieve when taps is played. It's just little pieces in there, and not at any time during their funeral or during anybody else's funeral did I break military bearing. It is so important, and it is so difficult to maintain your military bearing sometime when emotions are running high. But you have to look at the greater good of what you do, or how you do it, and why you do it. And this is their story. I am simply a storyteller. It is not about anything that I did. It is about what they did. It is about what they mean to me. And 17 years later, I'm still telling the same story I told when I started this, to remember them, to keep telling their story. Because if I don't tell the story, who will? And that's why I tell the story, because somebody has to tell the story, and who better than somebody that knew them very well, who went to combat with them, who flew with them. When we were on flight missions, sometimes in Iraq, we'd have flare-ups with anti-aircraft guns, and they have to do their little doodle things and fly kind of crazy to get away from the enemy. But I trusted all my pilots, and I trusted those even more, because I knew them personally. I knew that they were the best of the best. Like I said, this year it's a little harder for me to tell, because a couple weeks ago I lost a good friend, Vince Leon, a good friend of mine, died. Vince and me have known each other for about 5 years now, and I worked with Vince on several veteran projects with Vet Starts. And when you have another traumatic event happen on top of one that's already there, it makes that other event that much harder to experience, because you are reliving some of that trauma that you experienced from their death. But like I said, now I will tell the story of Vince, because Vince is part of this story now, and like I said, I saw on Facebook he was having a veterans event, 29, 30 different veteran organizations and stuff at VetStart, and so I called him up and I told him who I was and what I could do, that I was retired military, Army, I was a mess daddy, meaning I was a cook. He said, great, you can run my chow line for me. And so that's what I did. And it was a huge success. And then as I got more and more time with him, I started doing more and more with him. And to where he could count on me to be there when shit hit the fan with something in a big event, that I could jump in and fix it. Because that's how much trust factor we had between the two of us. Even though we had only known each other personally, but we knew what each other were as a veteran. We knew that we could count on each other and that we would be there for each other. When Vince died, I felt like a part of me died, and it did, and just like when my 3 friends died, a part of me died, and that is the fact of life, with people, if you're close enough to people, part of yourself will die when they die, and depending on how close you are, it's more of it, more of you will die, but what grows back there is the love and the memory that you cherish and that you have with each other, and that you will never forget those people, because you want to be a part of their life, and you want to be a part of their memory, and you want to tell their story to other people so they'll tell that story, and a lot of people, there's a lot of things that happen in Fort Hood, and now I realize after 17 years I have to kind of clarify events, so from now on I'll refer to this as November 29th, 2004, the Blackhawk crash at Fort Hood, Texas, which killed 3 of my friends, and in the aviation battalion, break it down to details so nobody's confused. I had one lady say she saw the movie. It's not the movie. Blackhawk Down is the movie. It did have a Blackhawk crash. It had 2 Blackhawk crashes, but it's not that. I wouldn't be talking about that because personally I didn't have an attachment to that. Yes, it was brothers I lost, but they weren't ones that I knew. So what you have to realize from all the stuff that's going on, you have to sometimes clarify which events you're talking about. It's just like November 5th, 2009 was when they had the shooting in Fort Hood. There's been a couple shootings in Fort Hood. So you have to clarify those events. But like I said, with David, Mark, Richard, and Vince, they're all part of the story now. They're all part of the story that I tell, part of their story that I tell. Like I said, the reason I'm telling the story is because of their sacrifice. It has nothing to do with anything I've done. Maybe one of these days somebody will tell my story when I'm gone. Maybe what I've been able to do the last couple years with my Facebook page and stuff. Maybe somebody will tell that story. I don't really care. I just don't want to be forgotten, and I don't think I will be. But, if you have people out there who you've known as veterans, and you're not telling their story, you're doing them a dishonor. You need to tell the story, and the more you tell the story, the easier it will become to tell. You will find a piece that you can't get anywhere else in the story you tell, because it's their story. You're remembering them. Yes, it hurts. Yes, it was a tragedy. Yes, their life was cut short, but they still live on. They still are a part of this world, And so, I know that some people may not like listening to stories like this, but I do, because I know that person that's telling that story is keeping their memory alive, and that's what I do. I keep their memory alive. And so, like I said, I'm here at the Gold Star Family Memorial Monument in Keller, and the reason being is because of the 3 moms that day that lost a son, the children that lost father, the fiance that lost her fiance, and the brothers and sisters that lost brothers. They're all part of the Gold Star family. And with Vince's case, his wife, his 2 daughters, his 2 sons, that lost a father and lost a husband, and the kids, grandkids, that lost a granddad. That's the reason it's being told today. So just want you to remember that you need to tell people's story so they're not forgotten. So in closing, I'd just like to say that we'll start back up next week. Probably going to talk about the holidays and about suicide. We have to talk about these tough issues because it's during these times, during the holidays, when things get really crazy and things get really hectic with people, and we don't need to forget people. We need to keep an eye on our friends and our brothers and sisters, because they're counting on us to do our job, and if that means talking to them and getting them out of that headset of suicide, then that's what we need to do. So y'all take care, and like I said, y'all have a good week, and I'll talk to you later.